There is a certain kind of change that does not arrive with trumpets. It arrives so small that you barely notice it. A single page turned, a single breath taken among the trees, a single meal eaten with a little more attention. And yet, given enough patient repetition, these small Japanese habits create a difference that is out of all proportion to their size. 8 of them, tiny things, that shape a calmer and longer life. I have wondered for most of my years why my country carries some of the longest life expectancies in the world, why the cities stay clean without anyone shouting about it, why so many ordinary people seem to move through their days with a settled kind of focus. It is tempting to say genetics or good fortune, but the truth I keep returning to is simpler and harder. It is habits, not the sweeping resolutions we make and abandon, but the small practices repeated across a lifetime, worn smooth by the years the way a river stone is worn smooth by water. None of this happens overnight. That is the part the modern world finds difficult to accept. We want the overhaul, the transformation, the before and after within a single season, but the changes I want to share with you work in a different way. They compound. A little today, a little tomorrow, and then one morning years from now you realize you have become someone else entirely, without ever once having forced it. My grandmother understood this in her bones, and though she rarely explained it in words, she taught it to me in the way she lived every ordinary day. My name is Kenji Sato, and I was raised by my grandmother in the old ways of Japan, where small daily habits patiently compound into a calmer and longer life. So if that idea speaks to you, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Let me begin with the first of these 8 practices, the one that underpins all the others. The first is Kaizen, which means continuous improvement, 1% better every single day. Not the grand overhaul begun in January that has burned itself out by the middle of February, but the almost invisible act of finding one tiny thing to make better and then making it better. My grandmother never used the word, and yet she lived it. She swept the same stone step every morning, and each morning she found a slightly better way to do it, a different angle of the broom, a different order to her movements. To a child watching, it looked like nothing. Looking back now, I understand it was everything. You may know that Toyota became one of the most successful car makers the world has ever seen, and Kaizen sits at the very heart of how they did it. Every worker, every day, looking for one small thing to improve on the line. Not a committee, not a grand plan handed down from above by men in distant offices, but thousands of tiny corrections made by the people closest to the actual work, the people whose hands knew the machines. Over years, those small corrections built something the whole world came to admire. No single change was dramatic, the sum of them was extraordinary. You can apply this to your own life without any special preparation, without a new plan or a new set of tools. Do one push-up, read one page. It sounds almost too small to matter, and that is precisely the point, because a thing this small slips under the resistance that stops us before we begin. One page a day becomes 365 pages in a year, an entire book, sometimes two. Read without ever once feeling that you are straining toward it. Kaizen removes the friction from change. It makes improvement so gentle that you hardly feel it happening, until the results become undeniable, and you find yourself wondering how you ever arrived at this new place. The secret the modern world tends to miss is that the size of the step matters less than the fact that you keep taking it. A grand resolution burns bright and then collapses under its own weight, because it demands more than a tired human being can give day after day. A tiny one asks so little that you can offer it even on your worst mornings, when you are ill or grieving or simply weary of everything. And it is the worst mornings that decide who we become, far more than the good ones. Kaizen is a promise you can always keep, and a promise kept every day, however small, slowly rebuilds your trust in yourself. That restored trust may be the truest reward of all, larger than the book read or the muscle earned. The second practice is Ikigai, your reason for being, the thing that gets you out of bed when the morning is cold and the blanket is warm and every reasonable part of you wants to stay. On the island of Okinawa, which researchers count among the rare blue zones where people regularly live past 100, almost everyone you meet can tell you their Ikigai without hesitation, as easily as they might tell you their own name. And those same researchers have drawn a line, carefully and over many years of study, between that steady sense of purpose and the long lives these elders enjoy. I want to be careful here because your Ikigai does not need to be grand. It is not a career or a calling stamped upon you at birth by fate. For one person, it is tending a small garden, coaxing the same tomatoes up the same trellis each summer. For another, it is teaching a skill to someone younger, passing along what would otherwise be lost. For many of the old people I have known, it was simply the hours spent with grandchildren, the sense that they were still needed, still woven into the living fabric of the family. A reason to rise does not have to be large, it only has to be real. In the West, you will often see Ikigai drawn as a diagram, 4 overlapping circles, the meeting point of what you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. That is a way people often describe it, a useful picture rather than an ancient doctrine handed down through the centuries in temples. I mention this because I do not want to sell you something false. Still, the 4 questions are worth asking yourself, slowly, over a cup of tea, with no rush to answer. What do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? What might you be paid for? Somewhere in the honest answers given time, a reason for being begins to show itself. The third practice is harahachibu, which means to eat until you are 80% full and no further. In Okinawa, people say these words to themselves before a meal, a small reminder spoken over the food, almost like a grace. It is a saying with old Confucian roots, carried down through generations, and there is a plain wisdom hidden inside it. Your brain takes around 20 minutes to register that your stomach is full. So if you eat until you actually feel full, you have already gone well past what your body needed, and you simply do not know it yet. The practice then is to leave a little space, to stop just before the signal arrives. Eat slowly. Put the fork or the chopsticks down between bites so the meal has room to breathe. Pause halfway through and ask yourself, honestly, how hungry am I still? This is not a punishing diet, and it is not about denial or willpower or shame. It is a gentle moderation, and that mild moderation, kept up across the years, has been linked again and again to longer and healthier lives. The elders of Okinawa were not counting anything, not weighing or measuring. They simply stopped a little sooner, and stood up from the table feeling light rather than heavy, ready for the afternoon rather than needing to sleep it off. There is something deeper here than the body too, though the body is reason enough. To stop at 80% is to practice a small daily act of contentment, to tell yourself that enough is genuinely enough. In a world that urges you at every turn to want more, to fill every space, to take the second helping simply because it is there, Harahachi-bu is a gentle rebellion. It trains a muscle that has nothing to do with digestion, the muscle of knowing when to stop. My grandmother ate this way without ever naming it. She would set down her bowl while a little still remained, fold her hands and be finished, and there was a peace in that small act that I have spent years trying to learn. The fourth practice is Shinrin-yoku, which translates as forced bathing, though there is no water and no bathing in the ordinary sense. It means simply being among the trees, walking slowly beneath them, breathing deeply, letting the unhurried pace of the woods become your own pace, until the tension you carried in without noticing begins to loosen. This is not folklore in Japan, not some quaint old belief. Doctors here genuinely recommend it, and write it into the serious advice they give their patients. The reason is written into your own body, and science has begun to trace it carefully. Time spent among trees has been shown to lower cortisol, the hormone your body floods itself with under stress. It brings down blood pressure. It appears to strengthen the immune system, so that you return not only calmer, but in some measurable way more resilient. Part of the explanation is that trees release compounds called phytoncides into the air, the substances they use to protect themselves, and when you breathe them in, something shifts inside you. Your body steps down out of that constant fight or flight readiness and settles into what is called the rest and digest state, the parasympathetic calm, where the body finally turns to repairing itself. And here is the mercy of it. You do not need a great forest or a distant mountainside. You need some trees and a little willingness to leave the loud world behind for a while. No phone, no podcast murmuring in your ear, no goal to accomplish, no steps to count, no photograph to capture. Just you, moving slowly, with the trees in your own breath and the small sounds of the branches. Even a modest park will do, if you give yourself over to it honestly, if you let it be enough. My grandmother had her one old pine at the edge of the garden, and she would stand beneath it in the evening, as though she were visiting an old friend. The fifth practice is wabi-sabi, and it is more a way of seeing than a thing you do with your hands. Wabi-sabi is the acceptance of imperfection, the quiet beauty of what is impermanent, incomplete, worn down by honest use. A cracked teacup, in this way of seeing, is not broken, it is lived in. It carries the story of every hand that has held it, every winter it has warmed, every morning it was lifted from the shelf. A weathered table, marked by years of shared meals and spilled tea, is more beautiful for the marks, not less, because each mark is a small memory the wood has agreed to keep. A wrinkle, then, becomes a map of a life, not a flaw to be smoothed away or hidden, but a record of every time you laughed and squinted into the sun and worried through a long night and loved someone with your whole face. When you begin to see the world through wabi-sabi, something loosens in your chest that you did not know was clenched. You are freed from the exhausting chase after a perfection that was never possible in the first place, a perfection the loud world keeps selling and no one ever reaches. You stop demanding that things be flawless, and you begin at last to appreciate what is actually in front of you, right now, exactly as it is. Wabi-sabi also teaches us about time, and about letting go. Everything passes. The cherry blossom is loved precisely because it lasts only a week, because we know as we look at it that it is already leaving. If it bloomed forever, we would walk past it without a glance. The same is true of an afternoon with someone dear, of a season of your own life, of youth itself. Their beauty and their brevity are the same thing, not two. When you accept this instead of fighting it, a strange peace arrives. You hold what you have more tenderly, knowing it is passing, and you grieve its passing a little less, knowing you truly held it. My grandmother had a chipped bowl she loved above all the others, and when I asked her once why she did not replace it, she only smiled and said that it had been with her a long time, and that was answer enough. The sixth practice is gamen, which means to endure hardship with dignity, to bear difficulty with patience and without complaint. I want to speak carefully about this one, because it is easily misunderstood, and misunderstanding it can do real harm. Gamen is not the denial of pain. It does not ask you to pretend that the hard thing is not hard, or to bury what you feel until it turns to poison inside you. That is not strength. That is only silence wearing the mask of strength, and it costs a person dearly in the end. Real gamen is something else entirely. It is the quiet resolve that looks squarely at a difficult season and says, this is hard, and I can carry it. It is the strength that does not need an audience, that does not announce its struggle to everyone within earshot, that does not demand to be admired for suffering. My grandmother had this in great supply. She lived through losses I still cannot fully imagine, losses that would have flattened a lesser spirit, and she carried them with a straight back and a steady voice, not because she felt nothing, she felt everything. But she refused to let the hardship take command of who she was, or to let it decide how she would treat the people still in front of her. I have come to think of Gamen as a kind of shelter you build for the people you love. When the storm comes and you meet it with steadiness, you are not only enduring for your own sake, you are making a calm place where the others can stand. A parent who does not fall apart gives a child permission to feel safe. A friend who can sit with hardship without dramatizing it becomes someone others can lean on. This is why Gamen matters beyond the self, and yet it must never harden into stone. The wise practice of it leaves room for tears in private, for honest words to a trusted few, for the slow tending of a wound. Endurance without tenderness is only stubbornness. True Gamen holds both, the strength and the softness, at the very same time. The seventh practice is omoyari, which I would translate as compassionate consideration, the habit of putting yourself in another person's place and anticipating what they might need before they have to ask for it. You see it everywhere in Japan, so woven into daily life that we barely think to name it. People speak softly on the trains, mindful of the stranger sitting beside them. They clean up after themselves without being told, leaving a place as they found it. They bow, a small bending of the body that says, without a single word, I see you, and I hold you in respect. The beauty of Omoyari is what it does to a whole community over time. When everyone is gently attending to everyone else, trust rises and stress falls, and the whole shared world becomes lighter to carry. You move through your day held by 1,000 small courtesies you never see arranged, and you offer 1,000 more in return without keeping count. And there is a gift hidden in it for you as well, a real one, because the moment you shift your attention away from yourself and toward the people around you, something in your own heart eases and unknots. Ask yourself, gently and often, how do my actions land on the people near me? That single question, taken seriously and lived out, will slowly reshape how you move through the world. There is a quiet science to this as well. Much of what wears us down is the endless circling of our own worries, the mind turned in on itself, gnawing at the same fears again and again. Omoyari breaks that circle. When you attend to another person, even in something as small as holding a door or lowering your voice, your attention leaves its narrow room and steps outside. Researchers who study happiness keep arriving at the same unglamorous truth that people who give of themselves, who tend to others, tend to be happier and to live longer than those who spend their days in pursuit of themselves alone. My grandmother would not have needed a study to tell her this. She simply noticed before anyone spoke. When a neighbor was tired or a child was frightened, and she moved to help, it was the most natural thing in the world to her, and the whole street was warmer for it. The eighth practice is kintsugi, and it may be the most beautiful of them all. Kintsugi is the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. When a bowl shatters, the craftsman does not hide the damage or throw the ruined piece away in frustration. He mends the breaks with lacquer mixed with gold patiently, so that the cracks themselves become veins of light running through the vessel. The bowl is not returned to what it was before. It becomes something more beautiful than it was before it ever broke, precisely because it broke and was cared for. I offer it to you as a way of understanding your own life. You will break, you will fail, you will carry losses and mistakes and seasons you would give almost anything to undo. This is not a dark possibility to guard against. It is simply the shape of a human life, the price of having lived one at all. But the cracks do not have to be the end of the story, and they do not have to be hidden in shame. Mended with attention and honesty and time, they can become part of your beauty, part of the very thing that makes you who you are, part of what others come to love in you. Do not hide your scars. Let the gold run through them. Let them catch the light. Notice too that the golden kintsugi is never poured onto a whole and unbroken bowl. There would be nowhere for it to go. It follows the break, exactly, and only the break. The very place where the piece failed is the place where the beauty enters. I have found this true of people again and again. The tenderest, wisest souls I have known were not the ones who had been spared. They were the ones who had broken somewhere and been mended with care, and who carried that gold with them into every room they entered. Your hardest chapter, tended honestly, may one day become the part of you that helps another person most. Now I have given you 8 practices, and I know the temptation because I have felt it myself. The temptation is to seize all of them at once, to wake tomorrow morning and overhaul your whole existence in a single burning day of resolve. Please do not. These are not quick fixes, and they were never meant to be swallowed all together in one gulp. They are principles that ask for time, the way a garden asks for time, the way a friendship asks for time. Rushed, they wither. Given patience, they take root. So here's my counsel. The same counsel my grandmother would have offered you across her small table over tea. Pick one, just one, the one that stirred something in you as you listened, the one your mind keeps drifting back to even now. Start so small that it feels almost laughable to call it a change at all. One push-up, one page, one meal eaten with attention, one slow walk beneath the trees, one honest bow. Let it become part of who you are, until you no longer have to think about it or remind yourself. And then, only then, when the first has settled into you like breath, add another. Over the length of a lifetime, these tiny habits create a massive difference. Not because you forced your way there through willpower, but because you let small things compound, day after patient day. The way a single coin set aside each morning becomes, in time, a quiet fortune. What you build is a life that is calm, purposeful, and deeply fulfilling. Not because it has become perfect, for nothing worth having ever is, but because it has become intentional, chosen with care, one small and deliberate step at a time. That, more than anything, is the wisdom my grandmother left me, and now, gently and freely, it belongs to you.